What's going on, guys? It's Crazy Dog here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a laptop sent in from MSI. Now, more often than not, when laptops come into the studio, I spend a week or two, I benchmark them, I play a couple of games, I do some render tests, and then I just stop using it, and then I just spit out a whole bunch of jargon and numbers and tell you whether or not I think it's a valuable product for you guys to purchase. In this case, what I did was no benchmarking whatsoever, and I just sat down and I just used this device for about 3 to 4 weeks to see if it's something that I could get genuine use out of. And I have to say that I really don't want to send this back. So MSI, if you're watching, if I could keep this, that would be fantastic. But this model right here, to give you guys a better look at the outside of it, this is the MSI WS75 9TK. This is a brand new workstation for them for 2019. And there's a lot of really cool things when it comes to what this computer can do and what it can offer you guys as the consumer and the potential owner of something like this. Now, I do want to let you know that workstation PCs, of course, are not necessarily made for gaming, though the graphics card in here is capable of pulling some weight. And I'm actually just going to spin this around as if you guys were in front of it here. But a couple of things about this device, just to get the specs out of the way. This is, of course, running Intel's new 9th generation i7 processor. The processor itself is clocked at 2.6 gigahertz base clock. It is a hexa-core processor with 12 threads, and of course it will turbo as well up to 4.6 gigahertz. RAM inside this guy as well is 32 gigabytes of DDR4 with a clock speed of 2666, 1 terabyte NVMe SSD in here as well. So storage is very, very fast and aplenty when it comes to this workstation PC. And the graphics powering this beautiful display are actually an RTX Quattro card, the Quattro 3000, if I'm not mistaken. It is running 6 gigabytes of GDDR5 for the memory. And when I mentioned before that this necessarily isn't made to game, it certainly can. It can hold its own fairly similarly to, say, the GTX 1060 when I looked up some benchmark differences, but a Quattro card is primarily made for productivity tasks, things like Photoshop and Premiere and the whole CC suite, AutoCAD, something that you're going to use, I guess, more so as a professional than just a leisure device. And we're going to go over kind of all around the chassis here. We're going to talk about how I've used this over the last month and whether or not I think that it's great for you guys. And I guess a TLDR is, it absolutely is. And we're going to get to why, but this thing really impressed me over the last month. And like I said, it's going to be kind of a heartbreaker to package this back up and send it back off to MSI. But to give you a little bit of a visual tour here, the screen at the very top, this is a 17.3-inch IPS display. Nice thing about this, it does also cover 100% of the sRGB spectrum, so video editing and photo editing are absolutely a pleasure as well. Nice thin bezels, and I don't know if you guys can really see that, but the actual frame itself, it's all nice and thin. It does have very nice one-handed operation, so very, very sleek. I guess I could hold this down just a little bit, but slides around because I have it on a mouse pad and not on an actual hard surface. But one thing to note as well with the display, because it is so thin, it has a little bit of flex to it, and because of the weight and the hinges that are used, at about here, it will shut itself. So I wouldn't necessarily let that happen all the time. I would one-hand operation all the way down until it actually closes, just to make sure that you have the best long-term experience. We have ample cooling up here. The keyboard down at the bottom, we're just gonna light up this, this desktop background again here. Boom, boom. So the keyboard is that traditional SteelSeries partnership with MSI. Key travel is great, no qualms, no issues, but if I get close, it's not very loud, which is one thing that I like. Because, again, this isn't a gaming-oriented machine, you're going to be using this at school, at coffee shops, in board meetings, so having a very loud and flashy keyboard, both audibly and with RGBs, really isn't the market that this is pertaining to. So I think it was very smart to go with the fashion that they did. Now, it is a full 10-key keyboard, so you do have your number pads here. All of your arrow keys are in typical orientation, so overall, very nice job on the keyboard. Now, the trackpad for me is kind of a mixed bag. I love it and I kind of hate it. Again, I might just get some B-roll of this, but if not, if you guys can see exactly how massive that trackpad is. Now, when I was using this for things like Photoshop or in Premiere for video editing, it was an absolute pleasure to have so much real estate going left to right on a horizontal axis to fine-tune my sliders or scrub through my timeline. But one downfall of a trackpad this big is through general use case typing, especially if I was just sitting on the couch, posting on Twitter, and I just did it right here. If you guys can see that, right here, we've just hit the right click, and I'm hitting it with the part of my palm right here that usually gives you false touch on curved smartphones like the S10, for an example. And to me, I'm not a big fan of that. I would have much preferred a smaller trackpad that was maybe pushed over just a little bit farther so I didn't have false touches. And again, honestly, I'm not trying to do that. There's the trackpad, and right here, if you guys can see that, I do have another false touch on the right click. So not the biggest fan of that. But if you were to use this in more of an office setting or that sort of environment with a different monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, not going to be a big issue for you. On the go, it might bug you. It bugs me. But the trackpad, other than that, is nice. It's nice and smooth. I had no issues with its responsiveness, which was fantastic. And it does have a fingerprint scanner right here as well. So security, definitely a must when it comes to a workstation-based build. So let's take a tour around the outside as well very quickly while I get my mind around some other stuff here. So on the outside, no flashy logos. You just have their little workstation logo from MSI. Very nice. You have a matte black finish. Fingerprints will still show up, but not quite as bad as something that's very, very high gloss. Nice gold accents and trim all around the whole thing. You can see that the hinges match as well. And on this side, the grill that's used inside does have some of those gold accents also. You have your power adapter inlet here. You have gigabit LAN, USB 3.0. This guy's kind of interesting. So this is actually a micro SD card slot. This is not the very first time that we saw this from MSI. This has been cropping up in a couple of their machines. Why they didn't just go with SD card, I'm not sure. In this camera and in most of my cameras, I do use micro SD anyway because dollar for gigabyte, I find they're actually a little bit cheaper and give you comparable speeds, but might not be your favorite if whoever's watching this does typically use SD cards. And then here you have your microphone in and your audio out. In the front, really nothing here, just a little tiny latch that you can get your finger into to lift the screen. And then over here, you do have USB-C or Thunderbolt connector. Two more, USB-C and then Thunderbolts right over here. Two USB 3.0s or 3.1s possibly, and your HDMI. And of course, because it's a laptop and they're still a thing, you do have a Kensington lock there as well. To round everything out on the very bottom here, you do have a couple of rubberized feet. Here and here, again, I don't know if you guys can see that, here and down here. These are the very small downward firing speakers. They're kind of tinny, they're not the best. I find when I use it on my lap, it probably sounds the worst. It needs a little bit of reverberation from a surface to really get the volume up into the air and kind of into your ears, but I mean, it is what it is. You've got an audio jack, you've got USBs, you're gonna have the opportunity to get audio by other means. This does have Bluetooth as well, so that's another viable option. And then here you do have your cooling grills as well. So this is using the same cooling system that we've seen in all of the other workstation PCs and the gaming-oriented laptops from MSI, the not Cooler Master, annotation coming up on the screen now. But this uses a large variety of heat pipes to make sure it dissipates as much heat as possible. Still pretty loud when it ramps up. It definitely needs to spin quite a bit to keep this guy cool, but I didn't really run into any thermal throttling issues through general productivity tasks, so I don't think that you guys will either unless you're doing very, very long renders. Now, speaking of renders, I did use this, like I said, for probably about 3-4 weeks. I had the opportunity to render out actually 2 videos for this channel and probably this one as well. And I was absolutely floored with exactly how well that worked. General workflow is simply just intaking my footage, popping it into Premiere, using Audition to tinker with the audio just a little bit. The PC that you see here behind me, she's old, but she's faithful and reliable. It's an FX 8320, and I find when I just use general broadcast settings in Audition, it takes quite a while to actually render out the audio to replace the stock audio being recorded from my Canon M50. This chewed through that, like even long clips. No more than, I would say, 30 seconds did it take for Audition to chew through that. And when it came to the rendering out my footage with a little bit of color grade on the footage, then an adjustment layer, some 3D graphics, intros, outros, and rendering that out just with a one pass at 40 megabit per second export. I found that this guy exported 4K at 40 megabits per second at about, I'd say, 1 minute for 1 live minute of footage. So in a 7-minute video, it took about 6 to 7 minutes to render that. With this guy here, a 7-minute video would take me about an hour. So I was absolutely floored with this guy. I was still actually able as well to make some thumbnails and tinker with a couple of tabs open in Google Chrome while I was exporting a render, which was fantastic. Something that you really can't do with Chrome that often because it's such a memory hog, but that's where the 32 gigabytes of GDDR4 really come in handy, or DDR4, I should say. But yeah, overall, this guy can game. Like I said, it's gonna run very similar to a GTX 1060, so 1080p gaming really won't be a problem in your, over 60s, some demanding games. If you do have it on an ultra preset, you might get, I would say, mid-range 50 to 60 FPS with maybe some lows into the 30s, depending on what you're playing. I have a GTX 1060 in my main rig, and it's really my processor that holds that back. But very impressed with this guy when it comes to just overall multimedia use and use case for what I do, which is YouTube and photo editing, and then just some regular tinkering. Now, battery life on this guy, once I unplug it, it is sort of set to balance, so I don't have it right down to like a battery save or super well optimized. But when I was doing videos, I would say I would get maybe an hour, hour and a half, not the longest battery. MSI has opted to go with their slim profile AC adapters, just like in most of the other content that we looked at from MSI, so not very concerned about having to lug the AC adapter with me, but I'd like to see maybe a little bit more than an hour and a half, but at the same time, the 32 gigabytes of RAM, Quattro 3000 card in there, and a 9th gen i7, there's a lot of power going into this, so I don't think it's really necessarily made to be battery friendly and used on the go 24/7. But yeah, the other really neat thing with this guy is it actually has been tested to military specifications, and these are tests that I haven't necessarily memorized, so let me look these up very quickly because I actually think that these are awesome and should actually set this guy apart as a really cool back-to-school laptop, even though it does have a price tag at about 3,500 Canadian, a little under 3,000, maybe 2,800 US. Links will be in the description with up-to-date pricing and availability, by the way. But this does have the military standard 810G military standard testing. So sand and dust testing for 90 minutes, vibration tests for 3 hours per axis, shock testing for 18 consecutive 20-gram impacts, mechanical vibrations from shipboard equipment 26 times, low pressure altitude up to 4,572 meters, high pressure altitude, that would be 12-kilometer altitude, down to -30 for 8 hours, high temperatures up to 71 degrees Celsius for 168 hours, and temperatures as low as -33 Celsius for 168 hours. So that's pretty crazy. That means that you really, and you shouldn't do this, but you could leave this in a car for a weekend in a Canadian winter and it shouldn't hurt it, which is super, super awesome. Of course, solid state memory, less moving parts, these fans won't be running. So kind of the cool thing is it makes sense that this would have that standard. I'm just gonna go through here to see if there's anything else that I missed. Again, USB Type-C, 3.2 Gen 1, Thunderbolt 3, we talked about that. Those side-mounted USB Type-A's were 3.2 Gen 2s, which were super cool. The one on the side next to the Ethernet port was a USB Type-A 3.2 Gen 2, and then the audio like we talked about before. I think that pretty much covers it. Like I said, for this guy here, no specs other than telling you that I can render out a 40 megabit per second 4K file at about a minute of watch time for a minute of render time with a couple of adjustment layers on there, some light color grades, some annotations, some different things like that using the motion graphics templates that are built into Premiere outside of After Effects. And if you're looking for something for back to school that's durable, that's nice, that you can game a little bit on, but if your schooling primarily is revolving around photo editing, video editing, CAD, anything like that, this guy, like I said, it's really got your name on it. We're gonna close down this guy again, just because I was cheating when I was looking at those specs. But that's it. This was just a very cool first look to let you guys know how I feel about this. Again, the WS75 9TK. Product specifications, up-to-date pricing, availability, purchase links, all that stuff will be in the video description. Not a super techie video, just something to show you guys how awesome that I think this is, how it kind of changed my life over the course of the last month, and how I think I might save up for one of these. I was gonna go with a gaming rig, but in all honesty, I've got this guy here. I don't game on it very much. I'm looking forward to Stadia. I've got the Oculus Quest coming in. Not necessarily a PC gamer as much as I probably should be. So something that's more tuned to productivity that will give me more for photo and video editing for my dollar compared to a gaming rig is really something that I'm gonna focus on going forward. And you never know, I may end up getting this one. So if you guys found this at all helpful, again, not a review, just a quick overview of this device here. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you just want me to open a box and tell you about it, or use something for a month and tell you my use case, or if you want me to go back to dedicated reviews where I kind of fill your brains with some information about the product, what it can do, and more testing involved instead of just regular use case scenarios. But that wraps it up for me. If you liked it, give it a like. If you didn't, I mean, dislike it. It's still interaction. YouTube likes it either way, I think. It makes me cry, but you know, whatever. And until next video, my name is Crazy Dog. You guys have been awesome, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.